Hello everybody, welcome into Calculus 1. I would like to thank everybody who's been with me so far. Thank you to everybody who's subscribed to my channel, who's interacted with me, who have been with me since the beginning, who have come in recently and at any point in between. You all have been amazing. I really do appreciate every single one of you. And a thank you to everybody in the future who joins us in the future. We do appreciate that too. So all of my videos from Basic Math 1 all the way up till now are online forever. You can view them anytime. Please feel free to, anytime you need it. They're there for anyone who needs it. They're free and they always will be. If you like the content you've seen and are going to see, please consider subscribing to my channel. It is completely free, no cost to you. It'll help you to receive notifications for when I post a video, especially if you find this material helpful. And it'll also help to grow the channel. And thank you again to everybody. So, Calculus 1. I know if you're brand new to calculus, it can sound very intimidating. I don't want you to feel intimidated. Calculus is not nearly as bad as you think. It sounds scary, but it's really not. I promise you, it's really not. If you did well with the algebra and basic trigonometry, you're going to be just fine. I can assure you of that. You'll be just fine if you did fine with algebra and trigonometry. Having said that, since we're now in Calculus 1, I'm going under the assumption that you're proficient in algebra and basic trigonometry, and there's no need to review it. If you do find yourself struggling with that, please feel free to watch my previous videos from those courses. I have from Basic Math 1, Basic Math 2, Pre-Algebra, Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2, Trig, and Pre-Calculus, all the way up till now in Calculus 1, that covers a variety of topics that you're going to encounter in this course. So, it's basically we're onward and upward at this point. So, the review of any algebra topics or basic trig will cease. I'm assuming you're comfortable with it, and we need to press on into calculus topics. But if you need help with the stuff that came before calculus, there is no shame in that. Especially because in the calculus courses, we can go quite a while without reviewing some of the stuff or doing some of the stuff we learned previously. Which really leads into my next topic of this video. When teaching Calculus 1, there are two schools of thought on it. When I took it at the university, I had a brilliant teacher. I love her to death. She was a wonderful professor. Now, at the university I went to, Calculus 1, we didn't do any transcendental functions. Calculus 1, basically, we did some basic trig, but we didn't do any inverse trig. We didn't do any exponential functions or logarithmic functions in Calc 1. We just did basic trig and power functions. That's all we did. But we also got into integration, basic integration in Calculus 1. The other school of thought, which is how I'm going to teach, focuses only on limits and derivatives, but it involves all transcendental functions too, including some brand new functions we're going to learn called hyperbolic functions. We will learn those in this course. The reason for this approach and the approach I've adopted is because I don't want us to go all the way till we get to Calculus 2 without having used logarithms or inverse trig functions and forget how to do it. I have seen that. You go all through Calc 1 without doing them, and then by the time you get to Calculus 2, you're like, oh crap, how do I deal with an inverse trig function? How do I handle a logarithm? That's what I'm trying to avoid. So that's why we are going to approach Calculus 1 the way we do. We're going to cover limits, which is going to seem a little boring at first. So if you're here for an exciting show, I hate to disappoint you. Calculus 1 actually starts out a little bit boring at first. We're going to start out with limits, and we're going to cover those in gory detail. And then the next topic of Calculus 1 will be derivatives. And then there's another big idea when we get to Calculus 2 called integration. But without limits, we don't have derivatives or integration or anything else that comes. That's why we're going to spend so much time on limits. And I almost thought about teaching limits at the end of pre-calculus, but it literally would have been I taught you limits at the end of pre-calculus, and then we come into Calculus 1, start it all over again and even more in detail. I didn't want to spend a month or more covering limits. That just didn't make sense to me. I figure I could do a better job teaching limits here in Calculus 1 because it goes into everything you would have learned about it in pre-calculus, everything, including some more stuff. So and I don't expect you to know limits just yet because you haven't learned it up to this point. So we're going to cover those in gory detail. Now, the big ideas of calculus in general, which we're going to cover in Calc 1, you're going to have slope, tangent lines, rates of change, minimum and maximum values of a function. Those are what are based on derivatives. Those are covered in Calculus 1. When you get to Calculus 2, if you want to find the area under a curve or a region, especially where conventional geometry fails, this is where we use integration. And then also there's a lot of sequence and series applications that apply to Calculus 2. You're going to learn even more stuff about sequence and series in Calculus 2 than you probably care to, that we didn't learn before in the other courses. We'll review, of course, what we've learned in other courses, because this is usually towards the end of Calc 2, and it'll have been quite a while since you've done sequence or series. So we'll review what we've learned before, plus we'll introduce new stuff. And then Calculus 3 is often called multivariable calculus. That's where you'll get into multivariable functions. If you recall from the end of pre-calculus, we were actually doing multivariable functions when we were dealing with equations of planes. Those are actually considered multivariable functions. And when we were dealing with vectors in space, well, Calculus 3 deals with multivariable functions. So those are the big ideas of calculus in general. But in Calculus 1, we're only focusing on limits and derivatives for single variable functions. Calc 1 and 2 both belong to single variable calculus. Calc 3 belongs to multivariable calculus. So the textbook I am using is called Calculus, I hope you can see it, Calculus Early Transcendentals 5th edition by James Stewart. James Stewart is a world-renowned author of calculus and other math textbooks, and many universities, including the one I went to, use his texts. He is an amazing author, does a great job of explaining everything, so I thought we would use that textbook. And that is actually the textbook we're going to use for Calc 1, 2, and 3. So for the next 3 calculus courses, we're going to use that textbook. So we'll be on Calculus 1 probably only for about 2 months, if that. Calculus 1 may be one of the shortest courses I ever teach. Now when we get to Calculus 2, on the other hand, it may be one of the longest courses I ever teach. But let's talk about what you can expect in Calc 1. I have a list written down. So the very first lesson, which will be the next video, we're going to introduce the idea of limits. What are they? We'll show it from a graphical perspective and from a numerical perspective. We're also going to talk about tangent lines and velocity problems. We'll do those at several different points throughout the course. We'll talk about something called one-sided limits, infinite limits, limits at infinity, limit laws and methods for evaluating limits. We'll talk about the squeeze theorem, also known as the sandwich theorem. Then we'll get into a bit of theory and abstract math where we talk about the precise definition of a limit. That is probably the hardest topic of a Calc 1 course, is the precise definition of a limit. But we'll be just fine. We'll cover that. We'll talk about continuity of a function and types of discontinuities. We'll talk about the intermediate value theorem. We'll talk about horizontal, vertical, and slant asymptotes. We'll get into trigonometric limits, which some of those can get a little bit crazy. We'll talk about derivatives first as a rate of change, and then we'll talk about derivatives of a function. And at first, when we learn derivatives, it's going to seem horrendous because there is a definition of derivatives that involve limits, the formal definition. Now, we'll get into some shortcuts for taking derivatives, especially with power rule, with exponential functions, logarithmic functions, hyperbolic functions, inverse trig functions, inverse hyperbolic functions. We'll also learn product rule, we'll learn quotient rule, and chain rule for derivatives. Well, let's see. We'll also even get into how to use the derivatives of functions to graph functions. This is actually more precise than anything we've learned so far. We can definitely use what we've learned so far to graph functions in calculus, but in calculus, we're actually getting more tools than what we've had before from pre-calculus and before that to graph functions. We'll also do some applied problems to apply derivatives to real-world concepts. So those are all of what you can expect in this course. So again, the next video is going to be the very first lesson of the course. We're going to introduce the idea of limits from a graphical perspective and then numerically by taking approximating values. So, let's see. I felt like there's one more thing I wanted to talk about. No, I think that's it. I think I covered it all. So, I will see everybody in the next lesson, and I hope everyone has a great day. Take care.